Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Eerie.News, and today is April 20th, 2022, Wednesday, April 20th, 2022. Yeah, I had to check there for a minute. Sometimes I either go back a day, go ahead a day. But anyway, let's get right to it. And this is out of the Sacramento Bee. And I'm sure everybody's always heard how one of these days California is going to fall off into the Pacific Ocean and that they have the fault line, a bunch of things. And I don't know. You know what? I've never lived in California. My son was stationed out there when he was in the Navy. But, people say, oh, you're crazy to live in a state where there's hurricanes. But you know what? What I think is crazier? Living in a place where there's earthquakes. This is titled Earthquakes Keep Coming. 3.9 magnitude quake is latest to rattle Southern California. A 3.9 magnitude earthquake is the latest to shake near the California-Mexico border, geologists said. The nearly 11-mile deep earthquake shook near Raleigh, California on Tuesday, April 19 at about 1:30 p.m., according to the U.S. Geological Survey. Dozens of people reported feeling the earthquake to the USGS shortly after it occurred. The earthquake is the latest to rattle the California-Mexico border. The region has nearly a dozen earthquakes with a magnitude of 2.5 or bigger in the past week, according to the USGS. The largest was a 4.6 magnitude earthquake near El Sausal on Friday, April 15. More than 4,000 people reported feeling the earthquake to the agency. Light shaking could be felt in San Diego and Long Beach. Earthquakes keep coming, and here I am more worried about anime figurines breaking than my own well-being, one person said on Twitter. Magnitude measures the energy released at the source of the earthquake. The U.S. Geological Survey says it replaces the old Richter scale. Quakes between 2.5 and 5.4 magnitude are often felt, but rarely because much damage, according to Michigan Tech. Quakes below 2.5 magnitude are seldom felt by most people. Let's see. And maybe I've heard that people sometimes they're used to it when they live out in a place that has this type of, it's normal. In other words, after a while, um, they just don't think about it anymore. You know, like he said, the Twitter person said, "Hey, I'm more worried about my figurines than myself." But anyway, let's go on to a little bit of true crime. This is woman killed by happy face killer 28 years ago is now identified. California cop said. DNA testing just identified a woman 28 years after she was killed by the happy face killer in California, the sheriff's office said. A woman's body was found in 1993 along the California State Route 152 in an unincorporated area in Gilroy, the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office said in a news release. She was wearing blue clothing, but her identity remained unknown. The sheriff's office said the county medical examiner ruled her death as undetermined. Detectives referred to Jane Doe as Blue Pacheco because of the clothing she was found in. A year after her death, a man sent anonymous letters to the Oregonian and the Multnomah County District's Attorney's Office admitting to 5 murders, the Oregonian reported. He signed the letters with a happy face. The Oregonian then ran a 5-part series from the letters. Authorities identified the happy face killer as Keith Hunter Jefferson and confirmed he killed 8 women in 5 years. He is now serving a life sentence at the Oregon State Penitentiary for the killings of women in Washington, Oregon, California, Florida, Nebraska, and Wyoming, the Oregonian reported. In 2006, Jesperson wrote a letter admitting to the killing of a woman near a California highway. He was convicted of first-degree murder in the woman's killing the following year, though her identity still remained unknown. Detectives revisited the woman's cold case in 2019 and partner with the DNA Doe Project. Their organization helps law enforcement identify Jane and John Does. The woman was identified as Patricia Patsy Skipple on April 13. Skipple of Colton, Oregon, would have been 45 years old. She was also a mother. Although this criminal case was adjudicated, detectives never gave up as they worked diligently throughout this investigation to provide closure for the family of Patricia Skipple, the sheriff's office said. And you know what? You know, I know a lot of people will say, well, but I mean, I don't know the particulars about this woman, about her lifestyle, who knows what. But I think for the family, especially if she had children, they even if this person maybe without knowing might have been in a risky lifestyle, there's always this doubt like did my mom walk away? Did she abandon us? Did she just leave and she's living a life somewhere under an assumed identity and she just left us behind? And besides the fact of actually knowing what happened to this person, if the mother or the family member, whoever else is in the family, it's different to say, you know what, regardless of what might have happened or what was involved in the relationships she had, that at least it wasn't that she just left and didn't care about anybody. That's it's it's kind of heartbreaking, but at the same time, it's the best I would think that out of a situation like this. This is another cold case, and and the reason why I'm bringing this up is in the prior things I was saying how DNA is helping to solve a lot of these cold cases that have been cold like cold for years and years and years. And not only solving the cases, linking cases that before the authorities had no idea were maybe the handiwork of the same perpetrator. Because despite what some people think that, yeah, some of these killers, once they're caught and they make a plea bargain and maybe they'll say, okay, don't send me to the gas chamber, the electric chair. Well, not electric chair anymore, but lethal injection, and I'll admit to whatever. Those people are psychopaths, sociopaths, whatever. They've lived their whole life lying. A lot of times they will not say everything about all their victims. They still have victims that they won't talk about. So sometimes this DNA, does come up either somebody that's in jail or was in jail and died, things of that nature. But anyway, and you know what? And the only thing again, this is seeking solace in the middle of one of the most terrible things that could happen to a family. All right, is that the very least, if your loved one was murdered, and you find out finally after many, many, many years, thinking that nobody was ever going to give you a satisfactory answer as to what happened to your loved one, that either one, that person was in jail or was sent to jail or died in jail. Maybe they were never convicted of that particular murder, but at the very least it's better than thinking my loved one got killed and whoever was responsible for it just walked away. Yeah, you never know what happened to them, but for all you know, they could be like sitting in a rocking chair, pretending to be a nice, sweet old person. Anyway, this one is titled Hunters Stumbled Upon Human Remains 37 Years Ago in Idaho. DNA just identified them. Hunters discovered skeletal remains in an Idaho forest in 1984 that went unidentified for 37 years. With the help of DNA testing, they were identified on April 8th as Roger Brian Bennett of Oklahoma, the Idaho County Sheriff's Office said in an April 11 Facebook post. In 1983, deputies found an abandoned camp near Powell Junction, about 400 yards from White Sands Road. Belongings were found at the camp, including a tent, sleeping bag, towels, cooking items, and a prescription eye lens. It appeared the campsite had been abandoned for a year, deputies said. Hunters then found a skeletal remains in 1984 near Colt Killed Creek, also near the Powell Ranger Station. Deputies said the remains were found with a pair of glasses that were missing a lens, as well as clothing items. But no identification was found with the man's remains. Authorities concluded the man had died in 1982. His cause of death was undetermined, the sheriff's department told Eerie.News. Bennett's remains were sent to a forensic anthropologist and then a crime lab for identification. His remains were entered into the NamUs database in 2010, a website created to track missing and unidentified people in the United States. A DNA profile of the man's remains were also logged into CODIS, the FBI's National DNA Profile Database. In 2022, his samples were sent to a private lab funded by NamUs for genetic genealogy testing, followed by a DNA sample being requested from a possible sibling in Oklahoma City and from their mother. The April 8th results concluded the man's DNA was a 99.98% match to his mother, leading the Idaho County coroner to confirm the remains as Bennett's. Born in 1955 in Oklahoma City, Bennett went into the Air Force until he was discharged in 1982 from Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi, Mississippi. His last letter to his family informed them about his discharge and his plans of finding an offshore oil rig in Houma, Louisiana. He was interested in journalism and had been a National Merit semifinalist. He was around 26 or 27 years old when he disappeared in the heavily wooded Powell area, which is about 60 miles southwest of Missoula, Montana. Okay. And this is the thing. Here's this guy. He's young, was in the military. He was no dummy. He was a semifinalist, and in other words, he had plans. He was going to go work. He had plans, and that's the problem when they discover these bodies or remains, what's left of them, sometimes skeletal. Sometimes it's really difficult to determine what happened to this person. How did they die? Okay, sometimes, yeah, sometimes you'll see, the person was struck in the skull, or if they committed suicide, sometimes they'll find a bullet still inside against the skull. But when all your soft tissue and everything's gone, it's really hard for them to determine, was this a homicide or did this person fall down and die? And you know what? His considering his age and everything about him, and obviously he's communicating with his family, he's got plans, and maybe he's just having a camping trip. You know what? That goes to show you, a lot of people think that, everybody's heard all these strange disappearances that Dave Paulides refers to, in regards to people that disappear and are never found. Obviously, and I know he has he crunches the numbers a certain way that there's a subset of these people, away from people that are lost or commit suicide or anything. But then it makes you wonder, and the reason why I'm bringing this up is that everybody thinks that if you're a young man, all right, healthy, strong, nothing can ever happen to you in one of these places. But I beg to differ, because this case right here is a very good example, all right? And Dave Paulides, he points out a lot of times about people, and I know that technology was not that, how can I say, it was not that around back in the 1980s that much, as far as ways a beacon and or telling people where you're at. But you know what? Going out in those woods by yourself and camping in an isolated area, I don't know about that. In other words, if I was going to go, I'd go with a bunch of people. Okay, let's go on to the next one. This is from also Sacramento Bee, dated April 6. Kids find skeletal remains in Oregon. DNA testing identifies them 12 years later. And that's another thing. The DNA also that's being found, that's very, very helpful, is these matches through these, like if you have a family member that does like Ancestry.com or one of these that, DNA match, you put in your DNA just to find what does my pie chart say. And let me tell you something. I'm gonna put a little segue. Do people ever wonder when they submit their DNA for getting their pie chart, like, hey, I want to know what's my, where do I come from? Where did my family come from? Did it come from here, from there, from where? Does anybody ever think about when they originally do this and give their real name and everything, that it's going to be used to cross-reference killers? And if you look at it from the point of view that, hey, if this is helping to catch or identify people or catch killers, but at the same time, I'm telling you that people should think about that as far as when they're submitting their DNA, even if it's just for genealogical purposes, as far as they've got that information. But anyway, let's go on with this one. An Oregon cold case was cracked after skeletal remains were identified and given to the man's family, officials say. Children playing in the woods discovered the man's remains in Hood River County in 2009, the Oregon State Police said in a news release on April 5th. A suitcase filled with clothes and a bag of toiletries were found near the man's remains, but nothing identifying the man was with his belongings. The Oregon State Medical Examiner created a dental chart from the man's teeth and sent them to the National Missing and Unidentified Person System. A bone sample was also submitted to the University of North Texas Center for Human Identification in Fort Worth, but his DNA profile didn't match a missing person or family reference standards in the FBI's database. In March 2021, his sample was sent to the Parabon lab. The report suggested he was a man reported missing in 2008 from the East Coast, troopers said. The medical examiner's office identified the man 4 months later after comparing his dental records to the ones from the skeletal remains. But the family didn't believe the man was their family member and they asked for more evidence. An oral swab was done on the man's sibling for further testing, and last month it revealed the man was their missing loved one. His remains were returned to the family and sent to a funeral home in April. The man's family has asked that his identity remain private. My colleagues and I are grateful for the opportunity to help identify this individual and assist in providing some resolution to his family. And you know what? In a situation like this where the family voluntarily gives their DNA, let's face it, if you have any doubt and you're submitting your DNA sample, whether it's the parent or the sibling, and it comes back, this is who it is. That's the one thing about DNA. It's like, that's pretty hard to, you know. Anyway, there's a bunch of stories that are really interesting, and maybe I'll do them for the next set. Okay. But let's go on to this next one. Let me see. All right. This is a follow-up, and I know some people heard of this, which was there was a Doomsday cult, and this woman and her husband, this was not the father of children, ended up it turned out that they killed a couple of kids, her children. Suspected, this is out of the Independent, suspected murders, mysterious deaths, and grand plans for Doomsday. The twisted case of cult mom Lori Vallow. A deeply disturbing pattern of alleged murders, unexplained deaths of people close to the couple, and bizarre cult beliefs about killing zombies surrounds the story of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell. Rachel Sharp and Justin Vallejo, they're in the trial right now. It looked every inch the fairy tale wedding. Dressed in white with pink flowers, garlands around their necks, the bride and groom couldn't have looked happier as they said their vows on a paradise beach in Hawaii. But beneath the surface of the celebrations, her two children had not been seen alive in 2 months. His wife had died just 2 weeks earlier. Now, in the 2 years since the November 2000 nuptials of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell, what has emerged is a deeply disturbing pattern of suspected murders, unexplained deaths of people close to the couple, and bizarre cult beliefs about killing zombies. The couple are each charged with the murder of Miss Vallow's two children, Tylee Ryan, 16, and Joshua J.J. Vallow, 7, after the remains were found in a shallow grave in the grounds of Mr. Daybell's property in Idaho in June 2020, 9 months after the last sign of life. Miss Vallow had told friends her children were zombies, and that the only way to free someone's soul from zombies was by killing them, according to prosecutors. The couple are also charged with the murder of Mr. Daybell's first wife, Tammy Daybell. Her October 2019 death was initially ruled as natural causes at the age of 49, and it was only after the case involving the missing children picked up steam that investigators grew suspicious and exhumed her body. The couple met while he was married to Tammy and she was married to her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. Miss Vallow is now also accused of conspiring to murder Mr. Vallow after he was shot dead by her brother Alex Cox in July 2019 in what was at the time ruled as self-defense. And yet another twist, when the case was reopened following the disappearance of JJ and Tylee, Mr. Cox died. Again, this death was ruled as natural causes, though he had the overdose drug Narcan in his system. Now, the latest chapter of the saga is about to start, as Miss Vallow, nicknamed the Doomsday Cult Mom, is scheduled to appear in court for her arraignment for the murder of her two children on Tuesday. This comes after her case was put on hold last year after she was ruled mentally unfit to stand trial. For almost a year at a mental health facility, she was back behind bars last week, paving the way for prosecutors to move forward with the case and try the couple together. Here's what we know about the case so far. The charges. Miss Vallow and Mr. Daybell were charged with the murders of Tylee and JJ in May 2021, almost 1 year after their bodies were discovered on the Daybell property in June 2020. The children had not been seen since September 2019, just 1 month after Miss Vallow moved with them from Arizona to Idaho to be with Mr. Daybell. That November, other family members of JJ asked police to carry out a welfare check on him, as they had not seen or heard from him in 2 months. The couple insisted they knew where the children were but refused to present them to authorities. Miss Vallow was first arrested in Hawaii in January 2020 on charges of desertion. Ever since, she has been held behind bars until her children's remains were discovered, and Mr. Daybell was also arrested. Meanwhile, Tammy Daybell was found dead on October 19, 2019. Prosecutors alleged in an announcement of the charges that the 3 homicides and related financial crimes were committed as part of a continuing criminal scheme. The couples are each charged in Idaho with conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder in connection with the deaths of the 2 children, and separately in the death of Tammy. Ms. Vallow is also charged in Arizona with conspiring to kill Mr. Vallow with the help of her now-deceased brother, Mr. Cox. She is also charged with grand theft and insurance fraud in relation to the Social Security benefits of Tylee and JJ. Chad and Lori Vallow Daybell, a love story. Mr. Daybell ran a publishing company that put out books about apocalyptic scenarios loosely based on the theology of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He met Ms. Vallow at a religious conference in 2018, and the two quickly became close according to the investigation. Soon they were traveling to meet each other and sharing steamy short stories, with Mr. Daybell writing a fictional piece about 2 characters who also met at a religious conference. They communicated using code or pet names like Lily, Bubby, and Raphael, and through burner phones and direct messaging on popular phone apps, according to computer and phone files found by investigators. As the intensity of the relationship heated up, investigators said their Doomsday-focused belief system began to grow. As many as 10 friends were drawn into the group that met to pray, drive out evil spirits, and seek revelations from beyond the spiritual veil. Their apocalyptical system of religious belief began in 2018. Around that time, Mr. Vallow was seeking a divorce because his wife believed she had become a godlike figure responsible for ushering in the biblical end of times. Friends told investigators that Miss Vallow and Mr. Daybell believed people could be possessed by evil spirits and become zombies, where their soul was trapped in limbo. The only way to rid a person of the zombie was for their body to die, according to police reports. Melanie Gibb, a friend of the pair, told investigators that Miss Vallow referred to her children as zombies. Investigators in Arizona found text messages saying that Mr. Daybell's previous wife, Tammy Daybell, was possessed by a dark spirit. Loosely based on theology from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, friends said they were veered into the extreme, according to a police report. The report said they believed in reincarnation and that Miss Vallow was a goddess sent to bring the second coming of Christ. Miss Vallow also told friends she had special powers like teleporting between Arizona and Hawaii, police allege. Mr. Daybell reportedly added he had a portal to travel to other realms and receive revelations. The group also believed that once a person became exalted, they could be held responsible for their actions on earth. Prosecutors say, they couldn't be held responsible for their actions on earth. That's pretty convenient, isn't it? Prosecutors say that Ms. Vallow has espoused the religious beliefs to justify the alleged murders. Police say the investigation uncovered documents that indicated Mr. Vallow discovered his wife's affair with Mr. Daybell just weeks before his death. He confronted her in a text message and then emailed Mr. Daybell's then-wife Tammy to let her know that their spouses were cheating. He was shot to death 11 days after sending that email. In the main investigation report, investigators wrote that they suspected the killers were motivated by greed for Mr. Vallow's life insurance money, lust for each other, and their strange religious beliefs. All of these covert acts were done so Lori could eventually be with Chad Daybell and reportedly complete their mission here on Earth, the report said. This belief system, lust and greed, would also lead to the deaths of Tylee, Ryan, J.J. Vallow, and Tammy Daybell. Mr. Vallow was killed when he went to pick up his son at his estranged wife's home in the Phoenix suburb of Chandler on July 11, 2019. He wanted to carry out a mental health intervention, but she was tipped off to the plan, investigators said. Her brother, Mr. Cox, shot Mr. Vallow in the driveway, claiming self-defense. He told investigators that Mr. Vallow attacked him with a baseball bat. Investigators questioned his account, noting he waited about 43 minutes to call 911 after shooting Mr. Vallow. He called his sister in the meantime, records showed. He also claimed to attempt a revival, but investigators said they found no indication of that attempt. Mr. Cox also claimed he shot twice while Mr. Vallow was standing, but police alleged forensic evidence showed Mr. Vallow was already on the ground when shot a second time. The two children went missing in September 2019, a few weeks before Miss Vallow and Mr. Daybell married. JJ, who was autistic, was adopted by Miss Vallow and was last seen alive on September 23rd at his Kennedy Elementary School in Rexburg, Idaho, according to an affidavit. Investigators later found the bodies of JJ and Tylee buried in Mr. Daybell's backyard in Idaho in 2020. Police have not disclosed their causes of death, but court documents said Tylee's body was partially burned. Rexburg Police Detective Ray Hermosillo told the court JJ had been found wrapped in plastic bags and duct tape. Tammy Daybell's obituary said she died in October 2019 due to natural causes, but authorities grew suspicious when her husband remarried just 2 weeks later, as the case of the missing children grew steam. Investigators exhumed her body for an autopsy and reclassified her death as suspicious. They linked the death with the disappearance of the two children, but did not release her cause of death. Both Mr. Daybell and Miss Vallow are now charged with her death. It is not yet clear how she is believed to have died or what evidence investigators have. Mr. Cox, who had shot Mr. Vallow 5 months prior, and what he said was self-defense, was found dead by his stepson in December 2019. The 51-year-old was found lying in the bathroom floor, gasping for air and vomiting, according to a police report cited by the Eerie.News. A medical examiner found he died of natural causes with indications of a blood clot wedged in the arteries of his lungs. High blood pressure also contributed to his death, the report said. The overdose drug Narcan was found in his system. The day he died, he called Mr. Daybell to receive a blessing over the phone, according to sources. Miss Daybell's case originally stalled last May when mental health evaluators ruled she was not competent to stand trial. Her case remained on hold while a mental health facility treated her to assist in her defense. Judge Stephen Boise's order said she is restored to competency and is fit to proceed. Miss Vallow will be transferred to jail and will be arraigned on the murder and conspiracy charges on April 19th. Mr. Daybell has pleaded not guilty to the charges, and Miss Daybell has not yet had an opportunity to enter a plea. The couple is scheduled to stand trial together in early 2023. If found guilty, they face sentences ranging from life in prison without parole to the death penalty. You know what? Isn't it incredible how psychopaths find each other? At a religious retreat, of all things. At a religious retreat. And that thing about everybody being a zombie. Oh, what a coincidence. The people that are in the way of you having this new life together with your new spouse, children, and she convinced her brother to do the the killing for her. You know these old noir films where like the postman rings twice, where the vamp gets the guy to do the dirty work? Well, she did it to her brother, and he dies 5 or 6 months later, or 4 months later. That's incredible. I hope they get the book thrown at them, both of them. Okay, and here she is. For those of you watching the video, I'm sorry, she's dressed in. She could tell she's in court. You're a court appearance, but she's got her mascara and her red lipstick on. I'm sorry, I love makeup, but and her hair done curled. Okay, how do we say narcissist? Yep, there's one right there. All right, let's go on to another story. Let's change gears here. This is out of the Daily Mail. Mystery of Christ's death solved. Jesus died from fatal bleeding after dislocating his shoulder carrying the cross, claims doctor turned priest. All right. Jesus died from fatal bleeding after dislocating his shoulder carrying the cross to his own crucifixion, a retired neurologist has claimed. The Bible details how Jesus fell when carrying the cross before his side was later pierced by a Roman soldier's spear, causing blood and water to shoot out. According to pious legend, St. Bernard of Clairvaux asked Jesus which was the greatest unrecorded suffering of his passion. Jesus replied, I had on my shoulder, while I bore my cross on the way of sorrows, a grievous wound that was more painful than the others, and which is not recorded by men. Scholars agree that Jesus most likely dislocated his right shoulder when he fell, carrying the cross. However, doctor-turned-priest Patrick Pulicino believes that he may have ultimately been killed by complexities linked to his wound. Pulicino also believes he can explain why, as told in the Gospel of John, blood and water poured from Christ's crucified body. The Reverend Professor Pulicino, based in London, has written a scientific paper about his theory and published it in the Catholic Medical Quarterly. He analyzed work carried out by forensic and medical experts on the Shroud of Turin, also known as the Holy Shroud, within which Jesus was wrapped after the crucifixion. For centuries, people have argued about the authenticity of the shroud, which has been preserved since 1578 in the Royal Chapel of the Cathedral of San Giovanni Battista in Turin, Italy. One of the most controversial relics in the Christian world, it bears the faint image of a man whose body appears to have nail wounds to the wrist and feet. Some believe it to be a physical link to Jesus of Nazareth. For others, however, it is nothing more than an elaborate forgery. In 1988, radiocarbon tests on samples of the shroud dated the cloth to the Middle Ages between 1260 and 1390, but more recent studies in the 2010s dispute this claim and instead argue that the linen sheet dates from the time of Jesus. Looking at the faint imprint on the shroud, which appears to show a figure bearing the wound of crucifixion, Reverend Professor Pulicino said the position of the man's dislocated shoulder was significant. He said it was pulled so far out of its socket that the right hand stretches 4 inches or 10 centimeters lower than the left. When stretched out for crucifixion like this, Reverend Professor Pulicino believes it would cause the subclavian artery, a pair of large arteries in the thorax that supply blood to the head, neck, shoulder, and arms, to rupture. This would in turn cause huge internal bleeding, he said, and ultimately result in a person's death. Not only that, but around 3 pints of blood would fill the cavity between the rib cage and the lung, which he argues explains why blood spurted out of Jesus when he was stabbed with a spear. The water, Reverend Professor Pulicino claimed, was like cerebrospinal fluid, which has a translucent appearance. Because of this right arm stretching, the right subclavian axillary artery was also subjected to stretch, as it was one of the only remaining intact structures connecting the body and the right arm. Transferring of body weight to the arms in inspiration is likely to have caused further stretching of the right subclavian artery. Transferring weight to the legs and exhalation would reverse the stretch. This would cause the stretched subclavian artery to move across the rib surface with each breath, and its underside would be subject to friction. This paper postulates that over the course of 3 hours, the subclavian artery became abraded, injured, and its wall attenuated until finally the artery ruptured and profuse bleeding ensued. Very interesting. Coming from somebody that has some background, medical background, that's a very interesting, uh, explanation for that. All right, let's see. Let's go to, this is still out of the Daily Mail. Toughest creatures on Earth finds its kryptonite. Tardigrades suffocate in snail slime but can hitch a ride on their shells. Studies find. They are known as one of the most indestructible life forms on Earth, but scientists may have uncovered tardigrades' kryptonite after discovering that the microscopic creatures suffocate when exposed to snail slime. It's a fine balance, however, as researchers say that gastropods can also be of benefit to tardigrades, allowing them to hitch a ride on their shells to travel longer distances. Also known as water bears, the 0.02-inch long 8-legged animals can live in extreme environments, including outer space, that would kill most other forms of life, but because they are so small, they can only walk a short distance by themselves. Tardigrades, which have tiny claws and a similar anatomy to caterpillars and woodlice, need water to live actively. However, they can enter a state of anhydrobiosis, where they can tolerate almost complete dehydration for years until water is available again. This ability is one of many that enables them to survive extreme conditions. Other characteristics allows tardigrades to survive being frozen in ice for several years and with no oxygen and exposure to cosmic rays in outer space. However, researchers at Adamowicz University, Poland, said they have found a possible weakness of the animals, snail mucus. Zofia Koziakiewicz and Milena Roskowska placed several tardigrades in petri dishes, then dehydrated them so that they would enter the protective state of anhydrobiosis. After 7 days like this, the two researchers added snails to the dishes and left them there for 1 minute so they would crawl over the tardigrades and smear their slime. The snails were then removed before researchers rehydrated the tardigrades and watched for any signs of movement at intervals of 3 and 24 hours. The authors found that 98% of the creatures not exposed to snail mucus survived, compared to 34% of tardigrades who were covered in it. In a separate experiment, I'm butchering this Polish name, sorry. Kisiakiewicz and Roskowska wanted to see if the snails could transport tardigrades to new environments. Many small animals can travel long distances by clinging to the body of a larger, more mobile creature, but because such behavior has never been observed in tardigrades, the pair decided to study it. They placed the tardigrades in the middle of a box to see if they could cross a surrounding barrier on their own, then compared the movement to when a land snail was allowed to move over them. The scientists found that tardigrades, left alone, were not able to move outside the barrier, but when they stuck to the land snails, they were moved significantly. Therefore, the experts believed that land snails could aid the transfer of tardigrades to new environments. They concluded that in this respect, snails may help tardigrades, but the gastropods also negatively affect tardigrades by reducing their chances of survival. This doesn't necessarily matter in terms of establishing a population in a new area. However, because tardigrades' ability to reproduce asexually means only one needs to survive the journey. That means snail travel could still be a viable means for the creatures to populate new habitats. What the researchers don't know is whether this happens in nature or how often. Writing in their paper, the authors said, our experiments showed that the snail-tardigrade interaction may have both positive and negative effects on tardigrades. Results of our experiments support the assumption that snails may transfer active tardigrades for short distance. On the other hand, the effects of the snail's mucus on tardigrade recovery to active life after anhydrobiosis was negative. Death rates of tardigrades in anhydrobiosis were higher when affected by mucus compared to mucus-free tons. The research has been published in the journal Scientific Reports. And that's interesting. They're considered one of the most indestructible creatures and can even go into outer space. But you know what's that saying? Everything has a weakness. And I think that sometimes, when let's go into sci-fi, weird themes for a movie. Like you remember the movie The Thing? How supposedly this thing was buried in the ice in Antarctica and was found by that team, and then it came to life, and of course it was mimicking human life. But according that was a large version of a tardigrade, plus the ability to mimic other life forms. But this idea of different life forms being able to live indefinitely under in an environment that would be lethal to most life as we know it here on this planet. So sometimes we got to be careful what we dig up from under the ice. Dun dun dun. All right. As you can tell, I'm doing this segment close to nightfall. It's about 7:30 p.m. here Eastern Time. And of course, that's why you hear my exotic birds going off and having a little meltdown, like because most birds, and then occasionally you hear the roosters crow, and then of course my dogs, they got to join into the trinity of the choir. So sorry, but so it is when you read the news from the homestead. Anyway, this last one, Jupiter's ice-filled, this is again out of Daily Mail. Jupiter's ice-filled moon Europa could have water near its surface, scientists believe, meaning it could be home to extraterrestrial life. See what I mean? The uncanny resemblance between features on Europa's frozen surface and a landform in Greenland suggests the icy moon may be capable of harboring life. Europa is the fourth largest moon of Jupiter and is thought to have a substantial liquid water ocean under its 50-mile thick crust of ice. A team from Stanford University explored similarities between double ridges on the surface of Europa and smaller versions of the feature found under Greenland's ice. Ice-penetrating radar revealed that refreezing of liquid subsurface water drove the formation of Greenland's double ridge, and if Europa's formed the same way, it could signal the presence of large amounts of liquid water near the surface. If Europa's features form the same way, this could signal the presence of copious amounts of liquid water, a key ingredient for life, near the surface of the thick outer ice shell of Jupiter's fourth largest moon. The study explored similarities between the elongated landforms called double ridges that are linear with two peaks and a central trough between them, and slicing through one looks like a capital M. If you sliced through one and looked at the cross-section, it would look like a bit like the capital letter M, said Stanford University geophysicist Riley Kohlberg, lead author of the study published in the journal Nature Communications. In the search for extraterrestrial life, Europa has attracted attention as one of the locales in our solar system that may be habitable, perhaps by microbes, owing to a global saltwater ocean detected deep beneath its ice shell. Innumerable water pockets closer to the surface will represent a second potential habitat for organisms. The presence of liquid water in the ice shell would suggest that exchange between the ocean and ice shell is common, which could be important for chemical cycling that would help support life, Kohlberg said. Shallow water in particular also means there might be easier targets for future space missions to image or sample that can at least preserve evidence of life without having to fully access the deep ocean. NASA's robotic Europa Clipper spacecraft is scheduled for a 2024 launch to further investigate whether this moon possesses conditions suitable for life. The shallow depth of Europa's potential water pockets, perhaps within 6/10 of a mile of the surface, would also place them near chemicals vital for the formation of life that may exist on its surface. With a diameter of 1,940 miles, Europa is the fourth largest of Jupiter's 79 known moons, a bit smaller than Earth's moons, but bigger than the dwarf planet Pluto. Europa's ocean may contain double the water of those on Earth. Life first emerged on Earth as marine microbes. Europa's double ridge, sometimes extending hundreds of miles, generally around 490 to 650 feet tall, with the peaks about 3 to 6/10 of a mile apart. Scientists have debated how they formed. Kohlberg was struck by the resemblance to a landform he knew from northwestern Greenland, with peaks about 6.5 feet tall, separated by about 160 feet, extending about half a mile. The Greenland double ridge feature formed from the successive refreezing, pressurization, and fracture of a near-surface water pockets, Kohlberg said. We see two ridges rather than one because the shallow water pockets was also split in two by a fracture filled with refrozen water. The water pocket in Greenland was about 50 feet below the surface, likely less than 33 feet thick and about a mile wide. If the same process spawned Europa's many double ridges, each associated water pocket could boast a volume similar to Lake Erie, one of North America's Great Lakes. Between having two potential habitats and the fact that double ridges and the near-surface water bodies they may imply are among the most common features on Europa's surface, it makes this moon a very exciting candidate for habitability indeed, study co-author Dustin Schroeder added. On Earth, researchers analyze polar regions using airborne geophysical instruments to understand how the growth and retreat of ice sheets might impact sea level rise. Much of that study area occurs on land, where the flow of ice sheets is subject to complex hydrology such as dynamic subglacial lakes, surface melt ponds, and seasonal drainage conduits that contribute to uncertainty in sea level predictions. Because a land-based subsurface is so different from Europa's subsurface ocean of liquid water, the study co-authors were surprised when they noticed that formations that streak the icy moon, looked extremely similar to a minor feature on the surface of the Greenland ice sheet, an ice sheet that the group has studied in detail. We were working on something totally different related to climate change and its impact on the surface of Greenland when we saw these tiny double ridges, and we were able to see the ridges go from not form to form, Schroeder said. The co-authors said their explanation for how the double ridges form is so complex they couldn't have conceived it without the analog on Earth. The mechanism we put forward in this paper would have been almost too audacious and complicated to propose without seeing it happen in Greenland, Schroeder said. The finding equipped researchers with a radar signature for quickly detecting this process of double ridge formation using ice-penetrating radar, which is among the instruments currently planned for exploring Europa from space. We are another hypothesis on top of many. We just have the advantage that our hypothesis has some observations from the formation of a similar feature on Earth to back it up, Kohlberg said. It's opening up all these new possibilities for a very exciting discovery. The findings have been published in the journal Nature Communications. I understand, you've got water, you've got life as we know it. Let's state that as we know it, viable life, a possibility, microbes, okay? And somebody needs to send Elon Musk a memo on this. But no, it's very interesting. But again, I'm not that familiar with what is the atmosphere or the climate there on Europa, but that would be interesting. All right, you guys, it has been a usual Eerie News day, so I will be back with you guys soon. Please go to Eerie.News if not only if you want to get the listen, I have the video, I have the podcast versions of these news updates plus articles. So check it out, Eerie.News, and I will be talking to you very soon. Have a great day.